All right. Good morning, everyone. Um, as you all may know, October 1 of this year, we saw landmark legislation pass modernizing licensure pathways and enhancing mobility. So I'm very excited this morning to welcome a few of those experts who've been directly involved with tracking or implementing these important changes for the accounting profession. First, just a reminder, we will be launching 4 polls during this meeting, so please be sure to respond to all of them in order to receive your CPE credit. And then also, if we have time at the end, we will open the room for questions. If you'd like to pre-send your questions to me via the chat, I'll get them queued up in the order that I receive them for you or I to ask our presenters at the end. So please just be sure to identify who your question is for if it's not easily identifiable. And before I introduce our first speaker, in order to give each of them enough time, I'll share their full bios in the chat box also this morning. All right, so I think our first speaker this morning is Tim Egan. Tim is the chair of the Connecticut State Board of Accountancy. And prior to Tim's role with the state board, he served as the lead audit partner at KPMG, working with some of the firm's largest consumer market, technology, media, and telecommunications clients. Tim has 35 years experience and has provided support to private and public companies at various stages of their development. While Tim retired in 2021, he's currently an active member of the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, NASBA, serving as the chair of the Regulatory Response Committee and a member also of the Strategic Planning Committee. Tim's also a CPA in Connecticut and New York. Tim, I'll turn the room over to you.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, April, for that nice introduction. And happy Wednesday morning to everyone. As April mentioned, my name is Tim Egan, and it's really my privilege to be here today as the recently appointed chair of the Connecticut State Board of Accountancy. I've been on the board since 2014, but just recently, less than a month ago, assumed the chair role. So again, very happy to join you today. And thank you for making the time to join, Tiffany, John, and me, where we're going to cover some important topics that we believe you as the Connecticut CPAs will find interesting and helpful as you navigate the rules and the regulations involving licensure in Connecticut. So on the first screen here is today's agenda. I'll be kicking off the discussion by walking through some of the key updates in Connecticut's CPA licensing requirements and also mobility provisions for out-of-state licensees looking to practice in Connecticut. You may know the board's role is to protect the public interest, but we do that while supporting a regulatory environment that allows the profession to adapt to new realities, like someone wants to change a career path or remote work models or multi-state engagements. And we're pretty confident that these changes are striking the right balance between regulation and opportunity for our professionals in the state. Next, Tiffany Colon with the Department of Consumer Protection. She will be covering some of the common questions, mistakes, errors, and good tips to know as it relates to things around application, renewals, and CPE processing. And then John Johnson, John's with the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy. John will be giving you a quick overview of what NASBA is, in case you don't know, and the Uniform Accountancy Act, which is really the basis upon which many of the states form their laws around licensure and mobility. John will also share status of licensure and mobility in the rest of the Northeast and the U.S., and what does that mean to you as a Connecticut CPA practicing in Connecticut, but looking to practice in maybe a neighboring state. And then lastly, just to give you a heads up, what's on the horizon for other potential changes in the UAA, which then may lead to potential changes in the laws and regulations within our state. So with further ado, let's jump into it. So first, I was looking to cover CPA licensure and what it now takes to qualify for licensure in the state of Connecticut. Well, I expect many, if not all of you, are currently or have previously been licensed as a CPA in Connecticut. So you obviously know what you've had to do to become licensed. So you may wonder, why is it important that you need to be aware of the recent changes? Because you've already been there and done that. Well, at some point in the past, chances are you were approached by someone. It could be a friend, it could be a nephew, a niece, someone seeking advice as they think about their future and asking about your career as a CPA professional and what is it that they would need to do to become a CPA. So I know I certainly have received some of those questions over the years. And having a good understanding of the current rules and approach to licensure will have you prepared to give that advice, and hopefully that piques their interest and it helps us attract more candidates, to this important profession. So I'd start with licensure changes first, and the when, what, and why. So as April had mentioned, effective October 1, 2025, there were changes introduced to how you would go about getting licensed within Connecticut. The revised law for pathways to licensure replaces that long-standing 150 credit hour rule with expanded pathway options. So instead of having to go 150, there's additional options for you to consider, including one that recognizes the benefit of experience and a broader role for professional experience. Now, this is a change that, the last change we've had was 25 years ago. That's when the 150 rule came into effect. So it's been some time since there has been some change, but we think it's all for the right reasons. And the question is, why the change? So I'm sure you've read it in the papers and you may be experiencing yourself within your businesses and the companies that you work with, but there's this talent shortage that we have out there with respect to CPAs. The number of people that have been choosing accounting as a major has been down over the years, which has challenged, our ability to attract and get CPAs to do the good work we do for our clients and the companies. Although there are signs that is getting better. Introducing additional pathways that makes it more accessible to certain candidates from various educational or experiential backgrounds, we thought was very important to do in order to make it more opportunistic for people to come into the profession, but do it the way that makes sense for them. So the expanded pathways do give candidates optionality when it comes to path work for their own personal situation, whether that involves, financial considerations. The cost of education to get 150 credits is not an easy thing for some people. Time considerations, that extra year of school was bearing down on people's decision of, do I want to really go accounting or maybe take a 4-year degree? And then options to change career considerations or something else. So it also more easily allows someone who didn't major in accounting and possibly working in a different career to get the accounting credits and work towards their CPA licensure. So all in all, we think the additional optionality of pathways offers more flexibility and will attract more candidates into the profession, which I think would be a great thing for all of us. So here are the new pathways. And before I jump into these, I just wanted to reference at the top, you'll see, there's 3 columns, if you will: education, exam, and experience. So there's really no change to each of those components of what we consider critically important in order to earn that that license and that designation as a CPE professional. Obviously, education establishes the academic base that every candidate must have before sitting for the exam and applying for licensure. The second examination, that's the uniform CPA exam. The purpose of that is to assess whether candidates have that knowledge and ability to apply the professional standards in real-world contexts. People know how hard that exam is and what it says about someone who could pass it. And so that's why it's so important. And the public looks at that as a real indicator that someone is prepared and confident to be able to act in a CPA and act on their behalf. And thirdly, experience. That's the requirement that bridges the gap between theory, the education that you learn in the books, and practice. And some might argue that learning from the on-the-job experience are at least equally important, if not more important than formal education that you receive in the classroom. I'm not one to argue against that myself, knowing my own background. When I first joined the firm and having to apply audit assertions that I learned in school, it didn't really click with me until I actually was on the job and experiencing it and having dialogue with my colleagues in terms of why we're doing these things. So with that, let me briefly walk through the new expanded pathways. So the first two are probably the closest to the previous 150 path. That's where you're required to get, in the first path one, you could choose to get a post-baccalaureate degree, a master's degree. You need to pass the exam, and that's the case for each of the pathways. And if you choose the post-baccalaureate degree path, you're required to have 1 year of general experience in order to become licensed within the state. Path two gives you the option to go for a bachelor's degree, but then if you have an additional 30 credit hours on top of the bachelor's degree, you can then pass the CPA exam, and then also, from an experience perspective, require only 1 year of experience in order to be licensed within the state. That might be attractive to someone who gets the bachelor degree, and maybe they brought credits in from high school, and they've got a number of credits, and they feel they want to take advantage of getting that CPA license faster, i.e. with that 1 year of experience. You can opt for that pathway. And the third pathway is the one that I think it really opens up the door to attracting more people when they think about time considerations, money considerations with education, again, if they so choose. So third pathway is you would require to have a bachelor's degree, again, pass the exam, but instead of 1 year of experience, you'd have 2 years of experience before you could actually get your CPA license. And so it's in effect recognizing the benefit of the extra year of experience and on-the-job training that you're getting, because again, as I mentioned earlier, there are learnings you're getting from experience that you might not get from the books. And so the complement of the bachelor's degree with the 2 years of experience is the final pathway that's been added to the options, and I think will hopefully serve the profession well. And again, meeting people where they are in their own personal lives and the best path that works for them. Now, I mentioned the degrees, post-baccalaureate degree and a bachelor's degree. The other key thing is that there are specific requirements as it relates to the education component in each of the pathways, and it's specific to the total educational program needing to include an accounting concentration or its equivalent as determined by the board by regulation to be appropriate. Now, under our existing law and regulations, accounting concentration wasn't defined. So knowing that the law was going into effect on October 1, our board had a special meeting to talk about the work that a special subcommittee did, where we did research on the topic around accounting concentration, trying to understand what other states are doing, collect information on what they were planning in respect of their educational requirements specific to accounting credits and general business credits. And then, so we took that information and had a approved draft regulations on a September 25th, 2025 special meeting that would qualify as accounting concentration. The draft regs will serve as guidelines by the DCP until the new regs are finalized. And they are subject to change because, there could be concerns identified along the approval process that may require some modification. But in the interim, we're going to go with the existing guidelines that we're recommending, which are laid out here. So under the draft guidelines, an accounting concentration is now defined as coursework that includes at least 27 credits in accounting education, and that may include the introductory accounting course, and at least 24 credits in economics and business administration education other than accounting. The references to general education has been removed. And again, these numbers are, if you think about the 150 credit model, those numbers used to be 36 in accounting and 30 in economics and business administration. The way we landed as a subcommittee and as a board on 27 and 24 reflects that, again, research we've done around what other states are doing, where they're landing, and in totality, looking at what we believe would be the required education, minimum education, in order to qualify for accounting education or accounting concentration under the education component. So that concludes the update as it relates to the education requirements. So let me move on to the exam, to which are no changes to the requirements. Yes, I'm sure it's no surprise you still need to pass the exam to qualify licensure. I mean, that is probably one of the key components of your ability to demonstrate your knowledge and mastery of the materials that you're required to perform your duties as a CPA. So under the exam rules, sitting for the exam, that's unchanged. Candidates may sit for the exam, but you need to have completed 120 semester hours. Again, no change there. Exam credits. The credit window for past exam sections is now 30 months, and it's a 30-month rolling period, and that was effective October 1, 2023. So no change, but a more recent change because previously that had been a tighter window at 18 months. Again, we think this is helpful to candidates as they're pursuing their journey to pass the exam and giving them plenty of time to be able to balance studying for the exam and the hard work that everyone's doing on their job as they're doing that. Continuous testing, that continues to be in effect. You no longer need to wait for a quarter to retake a failed section. You can get a notice to schedule scheduled much sooner than waiting for the full quarter. And then lastly, the CPA Evolution introduced the concept of core and discipline exam model. That standard remains unchanged since its introduction in January 2024. And those sections, again, are auditing and attestation, FAR, which is financial accounting and reporting, and then taxation and regulation, which is referred to as reg. And then candidates must then select one discipline section, either business analytics, information systems and controls, or tax compliance to pass. But again, 3 core, 1 discipline section to be passed in order to satisfy the exam requirements related to licensure. And lastly, let me address the experience requirement. These are more reminders than they are changes from the prior licensure model. So experience duration, hours, and timing. So minimum of 1 to 2 years of full-time experience, depending on your education pathway, which we covered earlier. 1 year equals 52 weeks, 35 hours a week standard for full-time, and a minimum of 20 hours per week to count. Experience must be obtained no earlier than 10 years prior to application of your submission. So anything in excess of 10 years cannot be considered with respect to experience requirement. And then qualifying experience, you must have provided services or advice involving the use of accounting, attest, management, advisory, tax, or consulting skills. And that may be obtained in public practice, which is where I had obtained most of my experience. Government practice or industry experience does qualify as well. And examples of work experience are detailed in the regs, and they remain unchanged. It's things like evaluating and testing internal controls, standard procedures, preparing financial statements, and the sort. Again, no change on the experience front, only in effect with respect to the one pathway. If you go bachelor degree, you would need 2 years of experience. Just some additional reminders here. The experience requirement must be supervised by a qualified supervising CPA, and that is a CPA who held a current valid CPA license or qualified for practice privilege in Connecticut for no less than 3 years prior to and continuously throughout the time period of the experience being verified. Now, in addition to the actual person doing the supervision, you could have human resources personnel verify that supervision. Again, it had to be at the direction of a qualified supervising CPA, or an auditor of public accounts for the state of Connecticut for an applicant whose experience was obtained while employed by the Office of the Auditors of Public Accounts, if no licensed CPA was in a supervisory capacity. So that's specific for someone who's working, within government. And last slide here is just the CPA licensing alignment in the Northeast and nationwide. So the changes that we made to the, not we, but legislative changes made, supported by the society and by the state board, those changes do reflect broader efforts to align our state laws with the evolving profession, and they are generally consistent with the Uniform Accountancy Act, which John will be commenting on later and give you a feel for what that represents and what it means to our state as well as other states. Again, flexible pathways, including those for bachelor degree holders, are being adopted nationwide. So we're not the only state doing this, and other states are in the process, have done it, or in the process of doing the same or something similar. And lastly, our board will continue to monitor the state efforts out there and remain open to advancing additional changes in support of the profession, our Connecticut CPA candidates and licensees, and ultimately with the primary interest of also safeguarding the public interest. Let me move into just some changes also on mobility. And again, the when, what, and why. So again, effective October 1, when the law went into effect, there are some fundamental changes to practice privilege, also known as mobility. And that's where CPAs licensed in another state, their ability to work in Connecticut without separate application for licensure. The revised law does introduce individual-based mobility from the previous state-based substantial equivalency model. Now, under the old model, substantial equivalency, that meant that a CPA that was licensed was where their license was issued by one state If that other state has licensing requirements that were essentially equivalent to those outlined in the Uniform Accountancy Act and in the state of licensure, they were deemed to be substantially equivalent, and therefore cross-border, if you will, ability to practice going from Connecticut to New York and New York to Connecticut was accepted. We've now moved to individual-based mobility model, which is just a little bit more adaptable than the previous state-based model, still maintaining robust protections, and it also helps Connecticut maintain practice mobility and respond effectively to all the nationwide changes that are happening in pathways. What is individual-based mobility? That effectively allows, again, CPAs in good standing from other jurisdictions to practice in our state without separate application. It grants, if you will, automatic practice privilege to anyone whose principal place of business is not in Connecticut. If you have a valid CPA license in good standing from another state, and if, importantly, you've met the education, experience, and examination requirements of Connecticut, then you would be deemed to be individual mobility approved and be able to practice in Connecticut without obtaining separate licensure. There is a grandfather provision that was put in place, knowing that not everyone is going to meet the current pathways. And so if you hold a valid CPA license or held one effective 9/30/25, so September 30th, and you had passed the exam prior to September 30th, 2025, you have grandfather provision from mobility to be able to practice in Connecticut from another state. And again, it maintains practice privileges, current policy of no required notice to our state board or the DCP or any fees for eligible CPAs who look at practice here. And I should mention also, John will be providing an update. You're probably asking, well, what about me looking to practice in New York or Massachusetts? John will give an update in terms of what's happening in their mobility laws, which is obviously very important for you as a Connecticut CPA. And just wanted to point out that all of the existing protections remain under the revised mobility law. So the rights granted are not without guardrails to ensure public protection is maintained. So we have a no escape clause. So individuals practicing under automatic mobility will consent to Connecticut's jurisdiction and disciplinary authority and to adhere to all of our state laws and board's rules. CPAs must cease providing services if their out-of-state license becomes invalid, and they may only perform certain services, example, audits and reviews for Connecticut clients through a Connecticut licensed firm. Additionally, there's expanded authority for the state board where we could cancel mobility if a state is not adequately protecting consumers. So if a state, as an example, has a strong consumer protection law, but fails to enforce them, that could possibly result in cancellation of mobility privileges for individuals licensed in that state. We don't expect that to happen very often, but again, it gives us the authority to do that. And so combined with individual eligibility criteria, this addition ensures Connecticut retains oversight over CPAs practicing within the state, which is critically important. Lastly, in terms of implementation, again, I mentioned early draft regs will serve as the guidelines. DCP is still reviewing the proposed regulations on licensure and mobility, and revisions to the proposed regulations might be required. It's not just DCP, to be honest. The proposed regs will go through a handful of different agencies: the Attorney General's office, the Legislative Commissioner's office, the Office of Policy and Management, the Regs Review Committee. There's a host of committees that touch this thing before it will be approved. And so revisions could be required by any one of them. It is a long process and could require some change. So I would say just stay tuned to that. In the meantime, we do have guidelines that we'll work with. Well, that ends my comments and my presentation on licensure and mobility. Now, I think April will introduce Tiffany Colon, who works with us at the DCP to walk us through her section on some of the FAQs, common issues, experience, and things to know as a Connecticut CPA. So April, I'll let you do the intro if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, next, Tiffany is the Associate Accounts Examiner with the Department of Consumer Protection in the Investigation Division. Tiffany supervises the Board of Accountancy and the Public Charities units, and in her role, she investigates complaints against CPAs, CPA firms, and public charities. Tiffany's been with DCP for about 3 years, and prior to joining them, she worked for the Department of Revenue Services for 4 years conducting sales tax audits. Tiffany holds a master's in accounting with a minor in criminal justice from Eastern Connecticut State and has assisted with the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, the VITA program. So Tiffany, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Tiffany Colon. I'm happy to be here and talk with you. I am going to be going over some frequently asked questions that is received from DCP, as well as some common mistakes and errors and good things to know for CPAs. So the first area we're going to start off with is, where can you get information? So we do receive this question quite a bit, and we do direct everyone to our website. As you can see, there is an image of the website there. So what we always tell people is, if once you're on the website, in that search bar, go ahead and enter in CPA, Certified Public Accountant, any of that, and a lot of different web or links will come up. The first link is usually the best one. That'll have most of the information you're looking for, including forms, any questions you may have, some of our statutes, and all that good stuff. Next slide, please. All right, and then the next question we always get is, where can I ask for more help? We do have a main phone line, but email is the best way to get a hold of us. So we have 3 areas where you can contact in reference to your CPA credentials. So if you're looking for anything regarding to licensing matters, we will direct you to dcp.cpalicense@ct.gov. If you have any inquiries about your CPEs, we will direct you to dcp.continuingeducation@ct.gov. And all other inquiries, including enforcement, peer review questions, extensions, all of that good stuff, we would direct you to dcp.accounting@ct.gov. Now, in reference to your CPEs and asking questions and forwarding those over to dcp.continuingeducation, we do like to let the public know that DCP does not maintain the information about your carryover. So if you have any CPE carryovers, by law, it is required that you as a CPA must maintain that record for up to 3 years and carry over your credits as needed. Next slide, please. So the next slide is, if I move out of state, do I need to maintain my CT license? So Connecticut is not, a residency is not a consideration in the CT licensing requirement. If you have an office in Connecticut, and if you perform a test services for any entity whose home office is in Connecticut, so if you work from home, but you're offering a test, you are required to maintain that iLicense in Connecticut. Next slide, please. And the next slide is, how can I get a license verification? So the Connecticut State Board of Accountancy primarily uses an online system for verification of credentials. This system is called eLicense. You can access this website through our DCP website, or by using that website that is posted right there, elicense.ct.gov. Once you access this website, you can print your current status. You can print all the information regarding your CPA credential. The online system will display also any inactive credentials and all your current credentials. So if you have multiples, whether it's a firm permit, your license or certificate, those will all show on there. And there's no fee to use the system. Next slide, please. Here are just a few screenshots of what that website will look like. That first image to the left will be the main screen that you will see. You don't need to log in order to look up a license. All you have to do is scroll to the bottom, and there will be a section that says look up a license, and you'll click that. Once you click that, you'll see the second screen off to the right. That second screen off to the right is where you'll enter in your credential information or the credential you're trying to look up. So if you're looking up a CPAL or a CPA license, you would be typing in CPAL and then the credential number. If you're looking up a firm permit, it would be CPAP, the credential number. And then lastly, if you're looking up a certificate, it would be CPAC and then credential number. Once you enter in that information, that last screen there at the bottom will pop up, including all the information regarding that credential. Next slide, please. And if a licensee would like a form for another state to be completed, the request may take up to 4 to 6 weeks for processing. Again, we have seen a lot of those turn around a lot sooner, but the standard is typically 4 to 6 weeks. You may request an out-of-state form to be completed by sending an email attached with the form to dcp.licensecpa@ct.gov. You will be notified by email once the request has been mailed, so that you will know that that request has made its way onto the next step. Next slide, please. All right. And then the next question that we get is, how can I inactivate my license? So there are a couple ways you can do this. If you want to put your license in an inactive status, you can choose to just not renew your license by December 31st of that year. If you do not renew that license by the 31st, you'll automatically be placed in an inactive status for non-renewal, or you can go into an inactive status by submitting the form to dcp.licensecpa. Form CPR 80 is going to be the form to inactivate the license for an individual licensee, or you could use form Rev 793, which would be the application to obtain retiree license status. Next slide, please. And then one of the last questions that we commonly see is, what is the CPE cycle and submission timeline? So every CPA or CPA is required to complete 40 credits, and they must be completed in the fiscal year. The fiscal year starts from July 1st to June 30th. Credits must be reported by the 31st of the year you're renewing, and those credits will be reported on that renewal. If you perform a test, you must complete 8 credits in audit or test, and you cannot carry those over. Every 3 CPE cycle, you are required to complete 4 ethic credits, and those are not allowed to be carried over. And up to 20 excess credits in that fiscal year may be carried over to a following year. And again, it is up to the CPA to maintain those records and to carry over as needed. Initial licenses may get a CPA exemption for first renewal, depending on the date of issuance. You can get more information about this on the website, as there's quite a bit of stuff in there, but there is a potential that you may be able to get those waived or exempted. Then the next area we're going to go over is going to be common mistakes and errors that we see at DCP for CPAs and CPA firms. So the first one that is a common one we see is that every practicing CPA, whether you're a solo practitioner or not, is required to have a firm permit. So Connecticut General Statute 20-281G provides, a person who holds a certificate shall not engage in the practice of public accountancy unless he also holds a valid license issued under Section 20-281D and a permit issued under Section 20-281E, or unless such person is qualified for practice privilege pursuant Sections 20-281N. The fee for a solo practitioner, there is no fee. All other firms are required to pay the $150 fee. Connecticut does not have firm mobility, meaning that even outside firms will need a firm permit. Typically, when you're working for a larger firm, you are typically working through their firm permit, so you can always check with your firm if you're not sure. But most smaller firms or solo practitioners are required to have that firm permit. Next slide, please. Another big common mistake that we do see is failure of notification requirements. There's quite a bit of requirements that are notifications that we are required to report to DCP. So they are required to be reported within 30 days of the change. So this can include any change of address for either the firm or the CPA, email address, change of employment, or any other information provided on your last renewal. For firms, again, this could be a firm name change, formation of new firm, or termination of an old firm, new offices that are open in the state, changes in partners, members, managers, shareholders, changes in partners' percentages of ownership, changes in legal form of the firm, or changes in management of any office. The main reason why we ask for this information for firms is that a lot of this can change the firm's eligibility requirements, meaning they may need to, a lot of firms are required to maintain at least 51% is owned by a licensee. So if we do see changes in ownership, that could trigger a violation if it falls under and any of that. So that's why we do request this information. The first time that a firm issues a financial statement or audit report, you are required to let DCP know within 30 days, just so that we can make sure you are properly going through your peer review and all the other stuff. If there's been any disciplinary actions against the firm or the individual, you have to notify DCP within 30 days, or any individual name changes. Next slide, please. And then another common mistake that we do see is the failure of peer review waiver requests. Peer review waiver request forms must be uploaded to the firm's permit renewal application every year. So Connecticut General Statute 20-281C provides a permit holder may be granted a waiver from the quality review requirement under: one, if it annually represents to the board that A, it does not engage in financial reporting or attest areas of practice, including audits, compilations, and review. B, does not intend to engage in such practice during the following year. And C, it will immediately notify the board if it engages in such practice. Any such request for waivers and any such representation shall be made in writing, under oath, and upon the forms provided by the board, which will be on our website. Such requests and representation shall be made at the time of the firm applies for renewal of its firm permit. So if you renewed, you should be uploading that waiver then, not after the fact. Again, case by case, we will review, but typically we are requiring that you have to do the peer review waiver request on your renewal for the firm permit. Any firm which has been granted a waiver shall immediately notify the board if it engages in the financial reporting or attest areas of practice, and shall undergo a quality review during the first calendar year after its initial acceptance of such an engagement. Next slide, please. All right, and another big area that we see mistakes or common errors in is failure to return client records. So Connecticut General Statute 20-281K provides a licensee shall return its client's original records to his client or former client upon the client's request and a reasonable notice. So client's original records include anything the client provided you or gave you access to. So a big one we see is with like QuickBook access or any of those like online sites where they maintain their records on. If the client is requesting their access back from that, you have to give that back. If you had a separate login or if you changed the password and anything, you are required to give that back on per their request. Reasonable notice in our statute does not give a clear definition. It is a case-by-case determination. Obviously, there may be some circumstances which may extend the time and how you get the records back. But generally, DCP says that it shouldn't take longer than 2 weeks to get those records back to the client. And next slide. Failure to respond to the board or DCP's requests. This is typically during an investigation, but it doesn't need to be an investigation. It could be an inquiry about your license. It could be just an inquiry about your CPEs or anything. So a violation, this is a violation of Regulation 20-280-15C, woefully impeding or obstructing any lawful request of any state, federal, or foreign agency. Most requests will have a 30-day timeline on it, but there are times some of our requests will have a shorter time frame, especially if they're simple requests, such as, hey, on your license, you provided the CP, can you provide the certificate with it? We may request that. That might not be a 30-day deadline. That might be a week deadline for that. And then the last area I'm going to touch on is good things to know as a CPA in Connecticut. So a good thing to know is that for CPEs, there is going to be a new CPE reporting starting this year. So previously, you would have to upload your certificates or a report showing all the CPEs you completed for the year. Now we are going to be utilizing a grid. So there is a image there to the left showing on the renewal application how you would enter it. You'll enter in the course name, the amount of credits, the completion date, the area it satisfies, and who was the CPE provider. Another good thing to know is that DCP does audit your CPEs at random, and this can include contacting the CPE provider to request your course records. This could be the course details, this could be a copy of the certificate, or this could even be the exam that you took for that CPE. Next slide, please. On this slide here is going to talk about retiree status. So for retiree status, in order to obtain this, it's only available to people for over 65 or older. A licensee issued a retirement status license shall not practice or offer to practice the occupation or trade for which the license was originally issued. So if you do receive retiree status for your license, you're not allowed to continue practicing as a CPA. You can still utilize the title, I believe, but you cannot practice. There is a one-time fee, there's no annual renewal, and there's no CPE requirements with the retiree status license. An important thing to know is that in order to obtain this retiree status, you have to have an active license prior to applying for it. Another unique benefit of having the retiree status is that you can reinstate the license at any time without needing to have those CPE credits completed before the reinstatement. And then next, CPA firms. A CPA firm name must be changed after 2 years of becoming a solo firm. So section 22-280-15CO states that a partner, shareholder, or member surviving the death or withdrawal of all other partners, shareholders, or members may continue to practice under a firm name, which includes the names of past partners, shareholders, or members for up to 2 years after becoming a sole proprietor. So after the 2-year mark, you are required to make that name change. Next slide, please. And next, CPA name changes. So again, kind of going off of what I was discussing earlier, CPA name changes are to be emailed to dcp.licensedcpa@ct.gov. If you are going to be submitting that, we do request that you include your CPA license or registration number, the current name that you have on your license, the new name that you are looking to change the license to, and then a copy of an official court document reflecting the name change. So this could be a marriage certificate, a divorce decree, or any legal document that shows that change, or a copy of a driver's license reflecting that name change. And then my last slide here is just a good way to contact us. You have our website there, our main DCP phone, our address, and then again, the 3 licenses or the 3 emails where you can contact licensing for CPEs or all other inquiries for DCP. And that's it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us on one of those emails.
Thank you, Tiffany. I think for time's sake, I will just go right into John, introducing John. John Johnson serves as Vice President of Legislative and Governmental Affairs for the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, that's NASBA, and was previously the Director of NASBA's Legislative and Governmental Affairs Department for 12 years. During John's tenure with NASBA, he has successfully implemented a sophisticated bill tracking system which annually identifies and monitors more than 500 bills nationally and allows NASBA to nimbly engage with jurisdictions in real time to shape legislative priorities and protect the integrity of the accounting profession. Prior to John joining NASBA, he was the Florida Institute of Certified Public Accountants. He was the director of governmental affairs. He was a registered lobbyist and responsible for administration of FICPA's government relations program. John is a FSU graduate with degrees in accounting and poli-sci. So John, floor is yours.
Thank you, April, and good morning, and really for the opportunity to participate in this town hall. And as mentioned, I'm with NASBA. The NASBA stands for the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, and we are an association that's been in existence for 118 years. And our mission is to enhance the effectiveness and advance the common interest of the 55 boards of accountancy around the United States, which includes your Connecticut State Board of Accountancy. And one way that we maintain interaction with our boards is really through the committee process. Next slide, please. And one of those committees, which happens to be a joint committee with the AICPA, is the Uniform Accountancy Act Committee, also referred to as the UAA Committee. And this joint committee was established back in 1984, and it is responsible for proposing updates to the UAA that are first exposed to everybody for comment, and then it would have to go through the NASBA and AICPA Board of Directors before the Model Act would be updated. Next slide, please. And as the name of the act suggests, really the overarching goal really is to advance uniformity while at the same time protecting the public and to promote high professional standards. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows just several of the UA milestones over the years and just a couple examples. In 1997, the third edition of the UA was released, and in that edition, we had substantial equivalency was established, which are the 3 E's needed for initial licensure, which are the 150 hours of education, 1 year of experience, and passing the CPA exam. You'll see there the fifth edition in 2007, that is when CPA mobility was established, which allows CPAs to practice in another state without having to get another license, so long as they have an active license in good standing from their home state, which is also referred to in the UAA as the principal place of business. Next slide, please. And most recently, we had the 9th edition of the UAA, which became effective earlier this year. The edition modernized the 2 existing pathways, and it added the new baccalaureate degree pathway that Tim just went through, along with changes to the mobility model. Next slide, please. So in addition to Connecticut moving forward with the new baccalaureate degree pathway, so did 29 other jurisdictions also move forward in 2025, of which 21 have been signed into law. And as we get closer to 2026, we anticipate the majority of the jurisdictions that did not move forward in 2025 to do so in 2026, which includes Vermont, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. I've already seen and reviewed their legislation, so they will be moving forward. It has not been filed yet, but we anticipate them filing in 2026. The legislation in New York, as of last week, was on the governor's desk, and that should be signed into law any day now. Next slide, please. When it comes to mobility, in addition to Connecticut, there were 25 other jurisdictions that moved forward to modernizing their mobility provision, moving, as Tim mentioned earlier, from that state to an individual-based model. And as of today, 19 of the 26 jurisdictions, which includes Connecticut, have had their mobility provisions signed into law. And we anticipate, as I said, a majority of the jurisdictions that didn't move this year to do so in 2026, which includes really the remaining states in the Northeast. And once again, the legislation in New York is on the governor's desk. And as we shift from this state to an individual-based model, the criteria is now going to be based on how the individual obtained his or her initial license. So if you obtained your license, let's say 30 years ago in 1995, how you obtain your original license will be compared to the requirements established by the state that you want to practice in. And so next slide, please. And so in order to ensure a more seamless transition, the UAA, they adopted a two-prong approach for states to adopt. And so the first prong is passing the CPA exam and then meeting the education experience requirements based on one of those three pathways that are now in the UAA. And next slide, please. The second prong is to adopt the safe harbor language, which is in Section 23 of the UAA, which essentially states if you hold a valid license as a CPA from any state as of December 31st, 2024, and you currently have a practice privilege, then you will continue to have that practice privilege moving forward. Very simple, very straightforward, but unfortunately there are a good number of states that did not adopt this two-prong approach. They adopted really their own pathway with guardrails and also did not include the safe harbor language. Next slide, please. Which is why NASBA recently launched our CPAmobility.org webpage. And this is to help CPAs determine where and how they can practice across state lines. And all you need to do is to type into your browser CPAmobility.org. Next slide, please. And this will take you to this landing page. And from the menu at the top, each of the states that you want to practice in. So for example, if you were to select Ohio, next slide, please. The Ohio practice privilege page will appear and provide the end user guidance on if they have the right criteria to practice in Ohio. And so unfortunately, until states adopt this safe harbor language, the mobility provisions being adopted by jurisdictions may cause confusion and require a bit more education until these states adopt the safe harbor language. I can tell you as of today, there's only really a handful, including Connecticut, that have adopted safe harbor language. The other ones are Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and Texas. The states that did not move forward to the Northeast, their language, the draft language I have seen, does include that safe harbor language going forward. So next slide, please, just real quick. I'm going to go through a couple things that the UA is going to be looking at. The first topic is just really the definition of a test. Next slide, or just advance that slide. And, as you know, the attest services are restricted to the licensee in a CPA firm. And the reason, why the definition of a test is coming before the UA committee is because there are some variations in the ability of a non-licensee to provide a test services in some countries. And so this is something that the UA committee wants to look at. Next slide, please. The second issue coming before the committee is going to be ESOPs, or employee stock ownership plans. And because ESOPs are an ownership structure within the CPA firms, the committee just wants to come up with some ESOP language to give guidance for state boards, and particularly around the natural person activity practicing in a firm. Next slide, please. And finally, the committee is going to look at alternative practice in private equity. And as you know, private equity investments in the accounting profession, it's emerging, it's a trend, yet it raises questions about really how boards and accountancy regulate a PE structure to ensure public protection. I'm going to just sort of end it there. I can tell you that NASBA had put together a PE task force trying to get some information around on making a recommendation not only to the UA committee, but also just to state boards. that barcode there will take you to that particular white paper that has been released by NASBA. There are three areas that they're focusing on. One is independence of professional standards. The second is the disclosure and public understanding and regulatory oversight and enforcement. In each one of those three categories, there are a number of questions that this white paper is asking for our members, our state boards, stakeholders, practitioners to look at. And so I encourage you to click on that barcode, read through the paper, and if you have time to go through those questions and provide your feedback back to the task force, and that will be very helpful as we move forward. And so very quickly, I know we're out of time, so I'm just going to turn it back over to you, April.
Yes, we did get a number of questions in the chat, and I think because we have gone over, and I apologize, John, if you didn't get as much time as everyone else, that I am going to email those questions out to each of you individually if you'd like to send me the answer, and then I'll get them to our members.
Absolutely.
And I think I didn't see anything here that was life-threatening or needed a response this moment. So everyone, I will definitely get you those answers. I know some of you got your answers as the presentation went on. So I'll get those out to you if there's any still left. And if you have new questions, please send them over to me through my email at april.d@ctcpas.org. And thank you everyone for being here. To our presenters, thank you so much for this information. We really appreciate you being here this morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.